They came to break him. 50,000 Hungarian fans packed the Hungaroring circuit with one purpose: to see Lewis Hamilton fail. For 3 days, they would boo his every move, question his every achievement, and try to destroy the confidence of a 6-time world champion. Hamilton had faced hostile crowds before, but never like this. Never with such pure, concentrated hatred. Never with an entire nation seemingly united against him. But champions aren't made when crowds cheer. They're revealed when the whole world wants them to fall. What happened next would change everything, not just for Hamilton, but for every person who witnessed it. Because sometimes the perfect revenge isn't about defeating your enemies. Sometimes it's about transforming them into your greatest supporters. This is the story of 70 laps that rewrote the laws of human nature, proving that excellence truly knows no boundaries. The black Mercedes van rolled through the gates of the Hungaroring circuit on a sweltering July morning. Inside, Lewis Hamilton sat quietly, staring out the tinted window at the green hills surrounding Budapest. The Hungarian countryside looked peaceful from here. Beautiful, even. He had no idea what waited for him just around the corner. "Lewis, we're almost at the paddock entrance," said Sarah Chen, his press manager. She shuffled through papers on her laptop, her usual calm cracking slightly. "The crowd is larger than expected today." Hamilton nodded, but didn't speak. He could already hear something in the distance. A low rumble like thunder rolling across the hills. But the sky was clear blue. This wasn't weather. The van turned the final corner toward the paddock entrance. And suddenly Hamilton understood. The rumble wasn't thunder. It was voices. Thousands and thousands of angry voices. Boom! The wall of sound hit the van like a physical force. Hamilton's jaw tightened as he saw the crowd pressed against the metal barriers. Hundreds of Hungarian fans waved signs and shouted at the top of their lungs. Most of the signs were in Hungarian, but some were in English. Hamilton could read those just fine. "Go home, Hamilton. British cheater. Verstappen is champion." Sarah looked pale. "Lewis, maybe we should use the back entrance today. The team No." Hamilton's voice was quiet but firm. "I walk through the front. Same as always." The van stopped near the paddock entrance. Through the window, Hamilton could see photographers pushing forward, their cameras ready. Security guards in bright yellow shirts tried to keep the crowd back, but they looked nervous. There were so many people. Hamilton took a deep breath. He thought about 2 weeks ago at Silverstone, where his car had touched Max Verstappen's Red Bull, going into Copse Corner. Max had crashed hard, very hard. The young Dutch driver was okay, but the accident had made fans across Europe angry at Hamilton. It was a racing incident. Hamilton whispered to himself. He'd said it 100 times to reporters. But these fans didn't want to hear that. The van door opened. The sound of booing rushed in like a flood. Hamilton stepped out onto the hot asphalt, and the noise got even louder. "Hamilton out. Hamilton out." He forced a smile and waved to the crowd. Inside, his heart was beating fast. He'd faced Heysel crowds before, but never like this. These people really hated him. A security guard appeared at his elbow. "Sir, we can escort you quickly to the Mercedes garage." "Thank you, but I'll walk the normal route," Hamilton said. He started toward the paddock entrance, signing autographs as he went. His hand shook slightly as he wrote his name on caps and photos. In the crowd, 12-year-old Zara Molnar stood on her toes trying to see over the adults in front of her. Her father, Victor, held her shoulders, keeping her steady. "There he is," Victor said, his voice hard. "The man who ruins everything he touches." Zara had heard this story many times. Her father used to work as a mechanic for racing teams. He'd told her how Hamilton's McLaren team had gotten special treatment when he was young. How politics, not talent, had gotten him to Formula 1. How he'd ended the career of Zsolt Baumgartner, Hungary's only F1 driver, through backroom deals. But as Zara watched Hamilton walk past, something felt wrong with her father's story. The British driver looked sad, not arrogant. When a fan threw a water bottle at him, Hamilton didn't get angry. He just kept walking, kept signing autographs, kept smiling even though his eyes looked hurt. "Papa," Zara said quietly. "Why does he look sad if he's so mean?" Victor didn't hear her over the crowd noise. He was too busy booing with everyone else. Hamilton continued down the paddock walkway. A young boy, maybe 8 years old, pushed a Red Bull cap toward him. Hamilton signed it carefully, then handed it back with a genuine smile. The boy looked confused. His parents had told him to hate this man. But Hamilton seemed kind. "Keep racing, okay?" Hamilton told the boy. "Dream big." The boy nodded, then ran back to his parents, holding the signed cap like treasure. As Hamilton walked further into the paddock, the booing followed him. It echoed off the concrete walls and seemed to come from everywhere at once. Other drivers watched from their motorhomes, shaking their heads. They'd never seen anything like this. Hamilton finally reached the Mercedes hospitality area. The team members looked worried as he approached. "Tough crowd today," said Angela Cullen, his trainer and closest friend on the team. "They'll change their minds," Hamilton said, but his voice wasn't convincing. Inside his air-conditioned motorhome, Hamilton sat down heavily on the small couch. The walls were thin, and he could still hear the crowd outside. Some fans had followed him deeper into the paddock, and their chants continued. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a photo of his grandfather, Davidson Hamilton. The old man had died 3 years ago, but Lewis still talked to his picture when things got difficult. Davidson had grown up in the 1940s, when being black in England meant facing hatred everywhere you went. He'd worked on the railways, fixing trains despite bosses who didn't think he was smart enough. He'd taught young Lewis an important lesson. Champions are made when nobody's watching, boy, but they're tested when everybody is. Hamilton stared at the photo. "I don't know if I can do this, Grandpa," he whispered. "They really hate me here." Outside, the booming continued. It felt like the whole country of Hungary was against him. Hamilton had won 6 world championships and 98 races. But sitting in that motorhome, he felt like a scared kid again. A knock came at his door. "Lewis?" It was Toto Wolff, the Mercedes team principal. "The driver's briefing is starting soon." "Come in," Hamilton called back. He stood up, straightened his team shirt, and took one more look at his grandfather's photo. Davidson's eyes seemed to twinkle in the picture, the same way they had when he told young Lewis stories about overcoming impossible odds. "Champions are made when nobody's watching." Hamilton repeated his grandfather's words. He opened the motorhome door. The sound of booing rushed in again, but this time Hamilton didn't flinch. He walked toward the briefing room with his head high. Behind him, in the grandstand, Zara Molnar watched through binoculars. Her father had brought. She saw Hamilton walking calmly despite all the noise and hatred around him. "Papa," she said, tugging on Victor's sleeve. "I want to learn about racing." Victor looked down at his daughter, surprised. "Why? You never cared before." Zara kept watching Hamilton through the binoculars. "I want to understand how someone can be so calm when everyone is shouting at them. That takes something special." Victor frowned. He'd spent years teaching Zara to dislike Hamilton, but now she sounded curious instead of angry. "Racing is more complicated than you think, little one." "Then teach me," Zara said. "I want to know everything." As they walked back toward their car, Victor wondered if bringing his daughter to the track had been a mistake. He'd wanted her to see Hamilton fail, to understand why he disliked the British driver so much. Instead, she seemed fascinated by him. The afternoon sun beat down on the Hungaroring circuit. In a few hours, the first practice session would begin. Hamilton would get in his silver Mercedes and try to find speed around the twisty Hungarian track. But first, he had to survive 2 more days of the loudest, angriest crowd he'd ever faced. As he sat in the driver's briefing, listening to officials talk about track conditions and safety procedures, one thought kept running through his mind. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't against other drivers. Sometimes they're against the world itself. The briefing ended, and Hamilton walked back toward his garage. The boom started again immediately, following him like a shadow. He waved to the crowd anyway, forcing that same smile. In 3 days, he would either prove his grandfather right about champions being tested when everybody was watching, or the hatred would finally break him. That evening, alone in his Budapest hotel room, Hamilton stared at the ceiling and remembered when the hatred first began. He was 8 years old, standing in the rain at a karting track in Rye House, England. His father, Anthony, had just bought him his first go-kart with money saved from working 3 jobs. The other kids' parents whispered and pointed, "What's that black kid doing here?" One father had said, not caring that young Lewis could hear every word. Anthony Hamilton had put his hand on his son's shoulder. "You belong here just as much as anyone," he'd said quietly. "Maybe more. But belonging and feeling like you belong are two different things." Lewis learned that lesson early. Now, 23 years later, Hamilton picked up his phone and called home to England. His father answered on the second ring. "How bad is it out there?" Anthony asked. He'd seen the news coverage of the crowd's reaction. "Pretty bad, Dad. They really hate me here." Hamilton's voice was tired. "Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it anymore." Anthony was quiet for a moment. Hamilton could picture his father in their old house in Stevenage, probably sitting at the kitchen table where they'd planned Lewis's racing career on napkins and scraps of paper. "Son, do you remember what we ate when you were 10?
Hamilton smiled despite his mood.
"Beans and toast. For about 6 months straight." "That's right, because every penny went to your karting. Your stepmother Linda never complained, not once. You know why? Because you believed in me. Because we saw something special. Not just speed, Lewis. Character. The way you handled yourself when those other parents called you names. The way you kept racing even when your engine broke down. The way you helped that kid who crashed in front of you instead of driving past for the win." Hamilton remembered that race. He was 12, leading by a huge margin, when another driver spun off the track. Lewis had stopped his cart to check if the boy was okay. It cost him the victory, but he'd slept better that night than after any win. "The people booing you today," Anthony continued, "they don't know that, Lewis. They only know what they've been told to think. But you can't control what people think. Son, you can only control what you do." After hanging up, Hamilton walked to his hotel window and looked out at Budapest's lights. Somewhere in this city was Zara Molnar, probably asking her father more questions about racing. Somewhere else was Victor, wondering why his daughter suddenly cared about the sport that had disappointed him so much. Hamilton's phone buzzed with a text from his half-brother Nicholas. "Saw the news. Remember what Grandpa Davidson used to say about storms?" Hamilton typed back, "That they make the strongest trees." "Exactly. You're the strongest tree I know, bro." The next morning brought no relief. If anything, the crowd at the Hungaroring seemed larger in anger. Hamilton arrived at the circuit early, hoping to avoid the worst of it, but hundreds of fans were already waiting. The boom started the moment his car appeared. Signs in the crowd had grown more creative overnight. Someone had made a huge banner reading, "British Bulldozer Go Home," with a cartoon of Hamilton's car crashing into others. In the Mercedes garage, the team tried to focus on preparing for Friday practice. But the noise outside made it difficult. Chief Engineer Andrew Shovlin looked stressed as he reviewed data on his computer. "The car balance isn't right," he told Hamilton during their morning briefing. "We're struggling with understeer in the slow corners. The setup we brought from Silverstone isn't working here." Hamilton nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Through the garage windows, he could see fans pressed against the barriers, their faces twisted with anger. Some wore Dutch flags to support Max Verstappen. Others wore Hungarian colors. But they all seemed united in one thing: hatred for him. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the scene from the Paddock hospitality area. She'd flown in from London that morning after seeing news reports about the crowd's reaction. As Hamilton's sports psychologist, she'd worked with him for 2 years, helping him handle the pressure of being the only black driver in Formula One. Elena understood pressure. Born in Mexico City, she'd been the first person in her family to attend university. She'd faced her own discrimination moving to England for her psychology doctorate. Professors who questioned whether she was smart enough, students who assumed she was there because of quotas, not ability. She'd seen the same doubt in Hamilton's eyes during their first meeting in 2019. He'd just lost the championship to his teammate Nico Rosberg, and was questioning everything about himself. "I don't know if I belong here anymore," he told her then. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I only got this far because I'm different, not because I'm good enough." Elena had spent months helping him understand that his need to prove himself came from deeper wounds. Not just the racism he'd faced, but the pressure of being his family's hope for escape from poverty. Now, watching him walk through the hostile crowd in Budapest, she saw those old insecurities returning. She pulled out her phone and sent him a simple text: "Champions don't avoid storms. They learn to dance in the rain." Meanwhile, at the edge of the paddock, Ferenc Nagy was setting up his small Hungarian flag stand. At 73 years old, Ferenc had been coming to the Hungaroring since it opened. He'd worked as a mechanic for the Arrows Formula One team in the 1990s and had seen every great driver of the past 30 years. Ferenc watched the crowd's reaction to Hamilton with growing disgust. He'd seen talented drivers destroyed by politics and prejudice before. He remembered when fans booed other foreign drivers simply for being different. Zara Molnar appeared at his flag stand with her father, Victor. They'd arrived early to watch the first practice session. "Why are people so angry at the British driver?" Zara asked Ferenc in Hungarian. Victor answered before Ferenc could speak. "Because he doesn't belong here. He takes opportunity from real racers." Ferenc studied Victor's face. Real racers? What makes someone a real racer? Talent. Pure talent, not politics. "Then you should watch him drive today," Ferenc said quietly. "I've worked with champions, son. I know talent when I see it." Victor frowned. "You think Hamilton has talent? I think Hamilton has something rarer than talent. He has the ability to make a car do things that should be impossible. But you're too angry to see it." As the morning progressed, Hamilton tried to focus on the technical aspects of preparing for practice. He studied video of previous Hungarian Grand Prix races, looking for clues about where to find speed around the tight, twisty circuit. But the constant background noise of the hostile crowd made concentration difficult. Every few minutes, a particularly loud chant or boo would penetrate the garage walls. His engineer Peter Bono Bonington noticed Hamilton's distraction during their setup meeting. "Lewis, the crowd getting to you?" Bono asked in his calm Yorkshire accent. "I'm fine," Hamilton replied automatically. "No, you're not. And that's okay. I've been your engineer for 8 years, mate. I know when something's bothering you." Hamilton looked up from the computer screen showing tire data. "They really hate me here, Bono, more than anywhere else." They do. But you know what? Some of the greatest drives in F1 history happened when the crowd was against the driver. Senna in Hungary 88. Schumacher in Britain 94. Sometimes being the villain makes you faster. Or it breaks you. Bono leaned forward. "Lewis, in all the years I've known you, you've never backed down from a challenge. Not when you were fighting for your first championship. Not when you came back to beat Sebastian. Not when you had to prove yourself all over again with Mercedes. Why would you start now?" Hamilton didn't answer, but something in Bono's words reached him. Maybe his engineer was right. Maybe the crowd's hatred could become fuel instead of poison. Outside in the grandstand, Zara Molnar was asking her father more questions about racing history. "Papa, tell me about the Hungarian drivers who raced in Formula One." Victor's expression softened. This was a subject he loved talking about. There was only one, really, Zsolt Baumgartner. He raced for Jordan and Minardi in the early 2000s. He was brave, very brave. But the politics of the sport worked against him. What kind of politics? Rich teams got the best drivers through connections, not talent. Baumgartner never had a chance because he wasn't part of their system. Zara thought about this. "Is that why you don't like Hamilton? Because you think he had connections?" Victor nodded. McLaren gave him everything from the beginning. A Hungarian driver would never get that chance. Ferenc, who had been listening, finally spoke up. "Victor, with respect, you're wrong about Hamilton." "How so?" "I knew Zsolt Baumgartner. Good driver, brave as you said. But Hamilton? Hamilton is something else entirely. I watched him in karting when he was just a boy. No connections helped him then. Just raw speed and determination." Victor looked skeptical. "Everyone says that about their favorites. Watch him drive today," Ferenc repeated. "Really watch. Don't think about politics or nationality. Just watch what he does with the car. Then tell me he doesn't belong here." As the first practice session approached, Hamilton sat in his car, waiting for the track to go green. The hostile crowd noise seemed to fade as he focused on the task ahead. He thought about his grandfather Davidson, who had faced hatred his entire life but never let it poison his heart. He thought about his father Anthony, who had sacrificed everything so his son could chase an impossible dream. He thought about every young black kid who might be watching, wondering if they could dream of racing too. The radio crackled to life. "Lewis, track is green. Time to show them what you can do." Hamilton pulled down his helmet visor and drove out of the garage. The booming erupted from the grandstand as his silver Mercedes appeared on track. But for the first time since arriving in Budapest, Hamilton smiled. Let them boo, he thought. In a few minutes, he'd let his driving do the talking. And maybe, just maybe, he'd remind himself why he belonged here after all. Dr. Elena Rodriguez checked into her Budapest hotel room as Hamilton's silver Mercedes hit the track for first practice. She could hear the crowd's reaction even from her fifth-floor window, a mixture of boos and scattered cheers that told her everything she needed to know about Lewis's mental state. Elena had worked with athletes for 15 years, but she'd never met anyone who carried as much weight as Lewis Hamilton. Not just the pressure of being a champion, but the burden of representing hope for millions of people who looked like him. She opened her laptop and reviewed her notes from their last session in London, 3 weeks before the Hungarian weekend. Hamilton had been struggling even then, questioning whether his activism was hurting his racing career. Sometimes I wonder if I should just keep quiet and drive, he'd told her. Maybe then they'd judge me only on my speed. Elena had seen this internal conflict before. The desire to belong warring with the need to speak truth. She'd faced it herself when she first arrived in England from Mexico City. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. "How's our champion doing?" Elena typed back, "Fighting ghosts." But that's what makes champion. She remembered their first meeting in 2019. Hamilton had walked into her London office looking like he carried the world on his shoulders. His teammate Nico Rosberg had just beaten him for the 2016 championship, and Lewis was questioning everything about himself. "I don't know if I'm good enough," he'd said, sitting stiffly in the chair across from her desk. "Maybe I only got this far because I'm different, not because I deserve it." Elena had studied his file before the meeting. 6-time world champion, over 90 race wins. Statistics that should have made any driver confident. But she understood that success doesn't heal childhood wounds. Sometimes it just makes them easier to hide. "Tell me about the first time someone made you feel like you didn't belong," she'd said. Hamilton had been quiet for a long time. Then he told her about being 8 years old at a karting track, hearing other parents whisper about why a black kid was there, about his father working 3 jobs to afford racing, about learning to smile when people said cruel things because getting angry would only prove their point. "I've been proving I belong my whole life," he'd said. "I'm tired, Elena. Really tired." That's when Elena knew she could help him. Not because she had magic answers, but because she understood what it felt like to be tired of proving yourself. Elena's own story began in a small apartment in Mexico City, where she was the first person in her family to finish high school. Her parents cleaned offices at night to pay for her education. When she earned a scholarship to study psychology in England, her professors assumed she was there to fill diversity quotas. "Your English is quite good," one professor had told her condescendingly during her first week. "Where did you learn it?" "The same place you learned to be rude," she'd wanted to say. Instead, she'd smiled and worked twice as hard as everyone else, just like Hamilton had learned to do on the karting tracks. Now, watching Hungarian television coverage of the practice session, Elena saw familiar patterns in Hamilton's driving. When he was relaxed and confident, his car looked like it was floating around the track. But when pressure mounted, he tried too hard, forcing the car into corners instead of letting it flow. Today, he was definitely forcing it. The timing screens showed Hamilton struggling in the midfield. His teammate Valtteri Bottas was faster. The Red Bulls looked dominant. Every mistake Hamilton made brought cheers from the Hungarian crowd. Elena's phone rang. It was Angela Cullen, Hamilton's trainer and closest friend on the team. "Elena, thank God you're here," Angela said. "He's not himself today. I've never seen him this affected by a crowd." "What's different about this crowd?" "The anger feels personal, like they don't just want him to lose. They want him to suffer." Elena understood. Athletic performance was as much mental as physical. A hostile crowd could either motivate a champion or break them down completely. The difference often came down to how the athlete interpreted the negativity. "I'll be at the track in an hour," Elena told Angela. "In the meantime, remind him of something. This crowd thinks they know him, but they've never seen what I've seen, which is a man who's strongest when the world tells him he's weakest." At the Hungaroring, Hamilton's practice session wasn't going well. His car felt sluggish through the slow corners, and the setup wasn't working. Every time he pushed harder, the Mercedes became more difficult to drive. In the grandstand, Zara Molnar watched intently through her father's binoculars. She'd been studying Hamilton's driving style all morning, trying to understand what Ferenc the old mechanic had meant about talent. "Papa, why does his car look different from the others?" she asked Victor. "Different how?" "Smoother. Even when he's going slow, it looks like he's dancing." Victor took the binoculars and watched Hamilton navigate the chicane section. Despite his struggles with lap time, there was an elegance to his driving that Victor hadn't noticed before. Ferenc appeared beside them, carrying his small Hungarian flag. "You see it now, don't you?" "See what?" Victor asked. Though he suspected he knew. "The way he makes the car dance, even when it doesn't want to. That's not something you can teach. That's God-given talent." Victor lowered the binoculars. For 20 years, he'd convinced himself that Hamilton's success came from politics and favoritism. But watching the British driver fight an uncooperative car with such grace made that explanation seem hollow. "Maybe I was wrong about some things," Victor said quietly. Zara heard this admission and smiled. "Can we learn more about him, Papa?" Before Victor could answer, Ferenc handed Zara a worn racing program from 1998. "Read about his karting career, little one. Then you'll understand why some of us never doubted him." Back in the Mercedes garage, Hamilton climbed out of his car after the session ended. His lap times were pointing, but more concerning was his body language. Bono could see the frustration in every movement. "The car's not right," Hamilton said, pulling off his helmet. "Too much understeer in the slow stuff, not enough grip on corner exit." "We'll work on it," Bono replied. "But Lewis, you're thinking too much out there. I can hear it in your radio messages." Hamilton knew Bono was right. When he was driving at his best, thinking happened at a subconscious level. The car became an extension of his body, responding to instincts developed over 20 years of racing. But today, the crowd's hostility had gotten into his head, making him conscious of every input. His phone buzzed with a message from Elena. "On my way to track. Remember, they're booing because they're afraid of your greatness." Hamilton smiled for the first time all day. Elena had a way of reframing negative situations that helped him see them differently. Maybe the crowd's anger wasn't about hatred at all. Maybe it was about fear. Fear that he might win despite their efforts to break him down. Dr. Rodriguez arrived at the circuit during the break between practice sessions. Security escorted her to the Mercedes hospitality area, where she could see Hamilton sitting alone at a corner table, staring at data on a tablet. She'd learned not to approach him immediately after difficult sessions. Instead, she ordered tea and watched him from across the room. His shoulders were tense, his jaw tight, classic signs of an athlete fighting internal battles instead of external competitors. After 20 minutes, Hamilton looked up and noticed her. His expression softened immediately. "I was hoping you'd come," he said as she joined him at the table. "How are you handling the crowd?" Hamilton gestured toward the grandstand visible through the windows. "They really hate me here. More than anywhere else I've raced. Or maybe they're just louder about it." "What do you mean?" Elena leaned forward. "Lewis, you've been the target of hatred before. But you've also been the target of love, admiration, and respect. The question isn't whether people have strong feelings about you. The question is whether you let those feelings control your performance." Hamilton nodded slowly. "Today, I let them get to me. Today was practice. Tomorrow is qualifying. Sunday is the race. Each day is a new chance to show them who you really are." "And who am I really?" Elena smiled. "A man who learned to drive in the rain when other kids stayed home. A champion who speaks truth even when it costs him popularity. A driver who can make a car do impossible things when everything is on the line." As they talked, Hamilton felt some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Elena had this effect on him. She could take the chaos in his mind and organize it into manageable pieces. "There's something else," Elena said. "I've been watching the crowd reactions today. Yes, there's hostility. But there's also curiosity. Some of these people have never seen you drive in person. They've only heard stories, most of them wrong. So what do I do? Show them the truth. Not with words, but with driving. Let them see why you've won 6 championships. Let them see why young drivers study videos of your races. Let them see the Lewis Hamilton I know." That evening, Victor Molnar sat in his living room reading Ferenc's old racing program. Zara's beside him, asking questions about every detail of Hamilton's early career. It says here he won the British Karting Championship 3 times, Zara said. And he did it with an old kart against richer kids with newer equipment. Victor read over her shoulder. The more he learned about Hamilton's background, the more his old prejudices crumbled. This wasn't a driver who'd been handed success. This was someone who'd earned every opportunity through pure speed and determination. Papa, can we watch the qualifying session tomorrow? Victor looked at his daughter's eager face. Yes, little one. But this time we watched to learn, not to judge. Late that night, Hamilton stood on his hotel balcony looking out at Budapest's lights. The city was beautiful and peaceful from this distance. Hard to believe that tomorrow thousands of people would gather to boo him again. But Elena's words echoed in his mind. Show them who you really are. Maybe that's what he'd been afraid of all along. Not that the crowd would reject the image they had of him, but that they might reject the real him too. Tomorrow, he decided he'd stop worrying about their approval and start showing them his truth. The crowd could boo all they wanted, but they couldn't change the fact that when Lewis Hamilton sat in a Formula One car, magic happened. It was time to remind everyone, including himself, exactly what that magic looked like. Saturday morning brought dark clouds over Budapest and the promise of rain. Hamilton woke early in his hotel room, immediately checking the weather forecast on his phone. Thunderstorms were predicted for qualifying, which meant anything could happen. Rain had always been Hamilton's friend. Some drivers feared wet conditions, but Lewis had learned to love them as a child. When other kids stayed home, he'd convinced his father to take him to empty parking lots, where he could practice sliding his kart around wet corners. Rain makes everyone equal, his grandfather Davidson had told him once. The fancy equipment doesn't matter when the track is slippery. Only skill matters then. As Hamilton dressed for the day, he thought about Elena's words from the night before. Today was his chance to show the Hungarian crowd who he really was. Not the villain they'd created in their minds, but the driver who'd won 6 world championships through pure talent. The crowd at the Hungaroring was even larger than Friday. Word had spread about Hamilton's struggles in practice, and fans came hoping to see him fail completely. The boom started the moment his car appeared in the paddock. In the Mercedes garage, the team worked frantically to fix the setup problems from Friday. Chief engineer Andrew Shovlin had stayed up until midnight analyzing data, trying to find the perfect balance for Hamilton's car. We've made some changes to the front wing and suspension, Andrew told Hamilton during the morning briefing. The car should feel more stable in slow corners now. Hamilton nodded, but his mind was focused on the weather. Light rain had started falling, making the track surface unpredictable. Some drivers would be terrified. Hamilton felt energized. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the Mercedes hospitality area as dark clouds gathered overhead. She'd seen Hamilton in wet conditions before. It was when he drove his best. Rain stripped away overthinking and forced drivers to rely on pure instinct. Perfect conditions for Lewis, she murmured to herself. In the grandstand, Zara Molnar sat with her father Victor, both wearing rain jackets as the first drops began to fall. Victor had spent the morning reading more about Hamilton's career, and his opinion was slowly changing. Papa, Ferenc says, Hamilton is the best rain driver in the world, Zara said. Is that true? Victor thought about what he'd read. Hamilton's victory in the 2008 British Grand Prix at Silverstone, where he'd won by over a minute in terrible conditions. His incredible drive in Brazil 2016, where he'd secured his 3rd championship in a downpour. The statistics don't lie, Victor admitted. In wet conditions, his record is remarkable. Ferenc appeared beside them, shaking raindrops from his old Hungarian flag. You picked a good day to watch him, little one. Rain reveals a driver's true character. As qualifying began, the track was damp but not soaking wet. These were the most dangerous conditions, not wet enough for rain tires, but too slippery for normal racing tires. One mistake could send a car spinning into the barriers. Hamilton's first qualifying run was cautious. He was still getting used to the car's new setup, and the track conditions kept changing as more rain fell. His lap time put him 8th fastest, not good enough to guarantee a spot in the next session. In the garage, Bono studied the timing screens with concern. Lewis, we need to find more time. You're right on the bubble for Q2. Hamilton's voice came through the radio. calmer than it had been all weekend. Copy that. The car feels better. Just need to trust it more. The rain intensified as the session continued. Other drivers were making mistakes, spinning off the track or sliding wide at corners. Hamilton found his rhythm gradually, each lap building confidence in the car's grip levels. With 5 minutes left in Q1, Hamilton was still in danger of elimination. The crowd sensed his vulnerability and cheered every time he made a small mistake. But instead of getting frustrated, Hamilton seemed to feed off their negative energy. His breakthrough lap came with 2 minutes remaining. As rain began falling harder, Hamilton put together a perfect combination in corners. His car looked glued to the racing line, while others slipped and slid around him. When he crossed the finish line, his time was good enough for 4th place, safely through to Q2. The crowd fell silent for a moment, surprised by his sudden speed. "Great lap, Lewis," Bono's voice crackled through the radio. "You found something special there." "Just getting started," Hamilton replied. And for the first time all weekend, he sounded like himself again. Between sessions, Elena made her way down to the garage. She found Hamilton sitting quietly in his car, eyes closed, visualizing the track. She didn't interrupt. This was his ritual before important sessions. When he opened his eyes, he noticed her standing nearby. "The car feels good now," he said. "Really good. How do you feel?" Hamilton thought for a moment. "Like I've been fighting ghosts all weekend. But ghosts can't drive racing cars." Elena smiled. That was the Lewis Hamilton she knew. Confident, focused, ready to perform when it mattered most. Q2 began with heavy rain falling. Track conditions were now clearly wet enough for rain tires, which leveled the playing field between different cars. Driver skill would matter more than car performance. Hamilton's first flying lap was immediately fast. Not just quick for the conditions, but genuinely quick. His car looked stable and predictable while others struggled with the standing water on track. Zora Molnar watched through binoculars, mesmerized by Hamilton's smooth driving style. "Papa, look how calm he looks. Everyone else is fighting their cars, but his looks easy." Victor had to admit his daughter was right. Even through binoculars, Hamilton's driving looked effortless compared to the other drivers. His car flowed through corners while others snapped and twitched. "That's 20 years of experience you're seeing," Forens told them. "Some drivers are naturally gifted in the rain. Hamilton is probably the most gifted we've ever seen." As Q2 progressed, Hamilton continued finding speed. Each lap was faster than the last, and his confidence grew with every corner. The crowd's reaction began to change. Booms were mixed with gasps of appreciation as he pulled off moves that seemed impossible. With 3 minutes left in the session, Hamilton set a lap time that was 2 seconds faster than anyone else. The gap was enormous by Formula One standards, like a professional runner beating amateurs in a race. Even Hamilton's rivals were impressed. Max Verstappen, struggling in his Red Bull, radioed his team, "How is Hamilton so fast? He's in a different race." The session ended with Hamilton fastest, by a massive margin. As he drove slowly back to the garage, some sections of the crowd actually applauded. They might not like him, but they couldn't deny what they'd just witnessed. Q3 would decide the starting positions for Sunday's race. 10 drivers remained, but Hamilton looked untouchable in the wet conditions. The rain continued falling, getting heavier by the minute. In his garage, Hamilton climbed out of his car feeling more confident than he had all weekend. The setup changes had worked perfectly, and the rain had allowed him to showcase his unique talent. "Lewis, that was brilliant," Andrew Shovlin said, reviewing the data. "Your sector times are incredible. You're finding grip where others can't." Hamilton nodded but stayed focused. One good session didn't guarantee anything. He still needed to perform when it mattered most. Dr. Rodriguez approached as he prepared for the final qualifying session. "How do you feel now?" "Like myself again," Hamilton replied. "Like I remember why I'm here." "And why are you here?" Hamilton looked toward the grandstand, where thousands of fans waited to see what he would do next. To show them that excellence has no color, no nationality, no boundaries, just speed. As Q3 began, the rain was falling so hard that visibility became an issue. Several drivers chose not risk setting fast laps, content to start Sunday's race from wherever they qualified. But Hamilton wasn't content. This was his chance to silence the doubters, to prove that all the booing and hatred meant nothing when he was behind the wheel of a Formula One car. His first flying lap in Q3 was extraordinary. Despite the terrible conditions, he found speed that seemed to defy physics. His car carved through standing water like it was on rails, never losing control despite the slippery surface. When he crossed the finish line, the time gap was stunning. He was 3 seconds faster than second place. In qualifying terms, that was like winning by a mile. The crowd was stunned into silence. Even the most partisan Hungarian fans couldn't boo after witnessing such an incredible display of skill. Some actually stood and applauded. But Hamilton wasn't finished. With 5 minutes left in the session, he went out for one final attempt. The rain was getting worse, making conditions even more treacherous. "Lewis, you don't need to go faster," Bono warned over the radio. "You've already got pole position locked up." "I know," Hamilton replied. "But I want them to remember this." His final lap was perfect. Every corner taken at the absolute limit. Every gear change timed to perfection. When he crossed the line, he'd improved his own time by another half second. The final margin was 4 seconds, the largest qualifying gap in Formula One history. The crowd didn't know whether to boo or cheer, so they did both, creating a strange mixture of sound that echoed around the Hungaroring. As Hamilton slowed down after his pole position lap, Bono's voice came through the radio. "Lewis Hamilton, that was one of the greatest qualifying performances I've ever seen. Pole position by 4 seconds. Hamilton's response was quiet but confident. "That's just the beginning, mate. Tomorrow, we really get to dance." In the grandstand, Victor Molnar sat in stunned silence. For 20 years, he'd convinced himself that Hamilton's success was due to politics and favoritism. But you couldn't fake what he'd just witnessed. "Papa," Zara said softly, "I understand now why Ferenc says he's special." Victor nodded slowly. "Yes, little one, I think I understand too." As Hamilton drove back to Parc Fermé, the crowd's reaction continued to evolve. The boon was still there, but it was mixed with something else now: respect. They might not like him, but they couldn't deny his incredible talent. Hamilton parked his car in the #1 position and climbed out slowly. For the first time all weekend, he looked truly relaxed. The rain had washed away his doubts along with his competitors' hopes. Tomorrow would bring the race, and with it one final chance to complete his transformation from villain to hero. But for now, he'd reminded everyone, including himself, exactly what magic looked like when Lewis Hamilton got behind the wheel of a Formula One car. Sunday morning arrived with chaos. Heavy rain had fallen all night, flooding parts of the Hungaroring circuit and forcing officials to delay the race start. Puddles of standing water covered the track, making racing impossible until conditions improved. Hamilton woke to the sound of thunder rolling across Budapest. Through his hotel window, he could see sheets of rain sweeping over the city. Most drivers would be worried about the weather, but Hamilton felt energized. Yesterday's qualifying performance had reminded him why he loved racing in the rain. His phone buzzed with messages from around the world. Fellow drivers, celebrities, even former rivals had watched his incredible qualifying lap and wanted to congratulate him. But the message that meant the most came from his father, Anthony. "Grandpa Davidson would be so proud. You showed them your heart yesterday." At the circuit, engineers worked frantically to pump water off the track surface. The start time was pushed back from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m., then to 5 p.m. Some wondered if the race would happen at all. In the Mercedes garage, the team prepared for multiple scenarios. If the race started behind the safety car, strategy would be crucial. If it began with a normal start, Hamilton's pole position would be a huge advantage. The weather forecast shows more rain coming, Andrew Shovlin told Hamilton during the morning briefing. But there might be a window of lighter conditions for the start. Hamilton nodded, studying radar images on the team's computers. He'd learned to read weather patterns like other people read books. Rain wasn't just water falling from the sky. It was information that could be used to gain an advantage. Dr. Elena Rodriguez arrived at the track early. Despite the delayed start, she found Hamilton in the team's medical center, where he was getting treatment for a stress headache that had developed overnight. "How are you feeling about today?" she asked, as the team doctor checked his blood pressure. "Different than yesterday," Hamilton replied. "Yesterday I was trying to prove something to the crowd. Today I'm just focused on racing." Elena recognized this shift in mindset. Hamilton performed best when he stopped worrying about external opinions and focused purely on the task ahead. Yesterday's qualifying had restored his confidence in his own abilities. The crowd will be intense today, Elena warned. Winning from pole position would silence them completely. But losing would make everything worse, Hamilton finished. I know, but Elena, I'm not racing the crowd today. I'm racing the other drivers. The crowd can watch or not watch. It doesn't change what I do in the car. This was exactly what Elena had hoped to hear. Hamilton had mentally separated the sport he loved from the people who might hate him for practicing it. Meanwhile, at the circuit entrance, thousands of fans waited in the rain for gates to reopen. The crowd was even larger than Saturday, with many people arriving specifically to see if Hamilton could back up his qualifying performance. Zara Molnar stood with her father Victor under a large umbrella, both wearing rain gear. Victor had been quiet all morning, still processing what he'd witnessed during qualifying. "Papa, will you cheer for Hamilton today?" Zara asked. Victor struggled with the question. 20 years of dislike couldn't disappear overnight, but yesterday had shaken his fundamental beliefs about the British driver. "I don't know if I can cheer for him," Victor said honestly. "But I won't boo anymore either. What he did yesterday, that was art, not just driving." Ferenc Nagy approached them, carrying his weathered Hungarian flag wrapped in plastic to keep it dry. At 73, he'd seen every great driver race at the Hungaroring. But Hamilton's qualifying performance had been something special. "Big day today," Ferenc said. "If Hamilton wins from pole position in these conditions, it will be one of the greatest drives in F1 history. And if he doesn't," Victor asked, "then the crowd will say he only looks good when conditions favor him. But I don't think that will happen." Yesterday he remembered who he is. As the morning progressed, Hamilton went through his usual pre-race routine: physical warm-up with Angela Cullen, strategy review with his engineers, quiet meditation in his motorhome. But today felt different. Calmer, more focused. He video-called his half-brother Nicholas back in England. "How's the weather looking from your end?" Nicholas asked, seeing rain in the background of Lewis's call. "Perfect," Hamilton replied with a smile. "Absolutely perfect. You sound different than Friday. More like yourself. Yesterday reminded me why I love this sport. Not the politics, not the drama, just the pure challenge of driving a car faster than anyone else." After the call, Hamilton sat alone in his motorhome, staring at the photo of his grandfather Davidson. The old man had died 3 years ago, but his wisdom still guided Lewis through difficult moments. "When the world is against you," Davidson had once said, "that's when you find out what you're really made of." Hamilton had spent the first part of this weekend letting the world's opinion affect his performance. But yesterday's qualifying had shown him a different path, excellence as its own answer to hatred. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Lewis, driver's parade in 10 minutes, called Sarah Chen, his PR manager. The driver's parade would be Hamilton's first public appearance since his pole position lap. As he walked toward the parade vehicle, he could hear the crowd's reaction building. When Hamilton appeared, the response was unlike anything from earlier in the weekend. Yes, there was still booing, but it was mixed with applause and even some cheers. Yesterday's performance had created cracks in the wall of hostility. Hamilton waved to all sections of the grandstand, including those still booing him. His smile was genuine now, not forced. He was no longer trying to win their approval. He was simply acknowledging their passion for the sport. In the grandstand, Zara spotted Hamilton and held up a small sign she'd made that morning: "Drive fast, Lewis." This time, Victor didn't tear it up. Instead, he helped her hold it higher so Hamilton might see it. Ferenc watched this interaction with satisfaction. "See how she's changing him?" he told Victor, pointing to Zara. "Children see truth more clearly than adults." "What truth?" "That talent has no nationality. Greatness belongs to everyone who witnesses it." As the parade continued, Hamilton noticed something unexpected. Some fans were wearing Mercedes team colors alongside their Hungarian flags. Not many, but enough to notice. Yesterday's qualifying had planted seeds of respect, even among his harshest critics. The rain intensified again as teams prepared for the race start. Officials made the decision to begin behind the safety car, giving Hamilton time to warm up his tires and assess track conditions. In the garage, Bono ran through final strategy options with Hamilton. "The forecast shows a dry window in about an hour," he explained. "If we time the tire changes right, this could play into our hands." Hamilton listened carefully, but wasn't worried about strategy. In conditions like these, driver skill mattered more than clever tactics. His job was simple: drive faster than everyone else. Dr. Rodriguez watched from the Mercedes hospitality suite as Hamilton climbed into his car. She'd worked with many elite athletes, but few had Hamilton's ability to transform pressure into performance. Today would test that ability to its limit. The formation lap began with Hamilton leading the field around the soaking wet circuit. Water sprayed from every car, creating a dramatic spectacle for the television cameras. But Hamilton's focus was entirely on feeling how his tires gripped the track surface. As they approached the starting grid, Hamilton could see the crowd on their feet despite the rain. 50,000 people had waited hours in terrible weather to watch this race. Many still disliked him, but they all respected what he might accomplish. The safety car pulled off, leaving Hamilton alone at the front of the field. In his mirrors, he could see Max Verstappen's Red Bull, eager to challenge for the lead. Behind them, 18 other drivers waited for the green flag. "Lewis, radio check." Bono's voice crackled through his headset. "Copy loud and clear," Hamilton replied. His voice was calm, focused. "Ready. Remember, we control this race from the front. Stay smooth, stay patient, and let your talent do the talking." Hamilton looked up at the red lights above the starting line. 5 red lights that would soon go out, signaling the start of the Hungarian Grand Prix. In a few seconds, all the talking would stop, and only driving would matter. "Understood," Hamilton said into his radio. "Time to dance." Elena Rodriguez leaned forward in her seat, knowing she was about to witness something special. Victor Molnar held his daughter's hand, both of them silent with anticipation. Ferenc Nagy raised his weathered Hungarian flag, ready to cheer for greatness regardless of nationality. The red lights began to appear one by one. Hamilton's hands gripped the steering wheel as his right foot hovered over the throttle. 20 years of racing had led to this moment, a chance to silence hatred with pure speed. In the grandstand, 50,000 voices held their breath. Supporters and critics alike knew they were about to witness either a masterpiece or a disaster. There would be no middle ground. The rain continued falling, but Hamilton no longer heard it. He no longer heard the crowd, no longer felt the pressure of representing anything beyond his own excellence. For the first time all weekend, he was exactly where he belonged, behind the wheel of the fastest car in the world, ready to remind everyone why he was a 6-time world champion. The final red light appeared. In 3 seconds, they would all go out together. Hamilton took a deep breath and prepared to show Hungary exactly what magic looked like when nothing held him back. The red lights went out. Hamilton's start was perfect. Throttle applied smoothly, tires gripping the wet track surface just enough to launch forward without spinning. But behind him, chaos erupted immediately. Max Verstappen, starting second, got wheel spin on the slippery surface and dropped back. Valtteri Bottas in the other Mercedes had a poor launch and fell to 5th place. By the time they reached the first corner, Hamilton had a clear lead, but the field behind him was bunched together and dangerous. "Good start, Lewis." Bono's voice crackled through the radio. "You've got 2 seconds on second place already." But Hamilton's advantage disappeared quickly. On lap 3, a collision between 2 midfield cars brought out the safety car, bunching the field back together. When racing resumed on lap 8, Hamilton found himself leading a pack of hungry drivers on a track that was still treacherously wet. This was where Hamilton's magic truly began to show. While other drivers struggled with their cars sliding and spinning in the wet conditions, Hamilton seemed to glide across the surface. His Mercedes looked glued to the racing line, taking corners at speeds that should have been impossible in the rain. Lap after lap, he pulled away from the field, not by huge margins. The rain was too untiggable for that, but consistently, methodically, like a master craftsman working on a piece of art. In the grandstand, Zara Molnar watched through binoculars, completely mesmerized. "Papa, look how smooth he is. Everyone else looks scared, but he looks like he's dancing." Victor had to admit his daughter was right. Through the spray and mist, Hamilton's driving line was perfect on every corner. He seemed to know exactly where the grip was, even when the track conditions changed from lap to lap. That's not just skill, Ference told them, raising his voice over the crowd noise. That's instinct developed over 20 years. You can't teach what you're seeing. By lap 20, Hamilton had built a lead of 15 seconds over second place. The crowd's reaction was gradually changing. The booming hadn't stopped completely, but it was mixed with something else now. Appreciation for pure driving excellence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the Mercedes hospitality suite, taking notes on Hamilton's radio messages. His voice was calm, focused, completely different from the stressed tone she'd heard on Friday. This was Hamilton in his element, doing what he was born to do. "Lewis, you're looking fantastic out there," Bono reported over the radio. "Lap times are consistently 2 seconds faster than anyone else." "Copy that," Hamilton replied, his breathing steady despite the intense concentration required. "The car feels incredible. Just need to keep it smooth." But the race was far from over. On lap 25, the rain began falling harder again, forcing all drivers to switch to full wet weather tires. Hamilton pitted first, and the Mercedes crew executed a perfect tire change in 2.8 seconds. However, several other drivers had stayed out longer, hoping to gain track position. When Hamilton rejoined the race, he found himself down in 7th place, with 6 cars ahead of him on track. The Hungarian crowd erupted in celebration. Finally, their hopes of seeing Hamilton fail seemed within reach. The booming resumed at full volume, echoing around the circuit like thunder. But Hamilton wasn't discouraged. If anything, he seemed energized by the challenge ahead. "Right then," he said over the radio, his voice carrying a hint of excitement. "Time to go hunting." What followed was one of the greatest displays of wet weather driving in Formula One history. Hamilton's first overtake came on lap 28, around the outside of turn 2, a move that required incredible car control and bravery. The crowd gasped as 2 cars went wheel to wheel through the corner, spray flying everywhere. Hamilton emerged ahead, and for the first time all weekend, some sections of the grandstand actually cheered. "That was beautiful, Lewis." Bono's voice was filled with admiration. "Absolutely beautiful." Lap by lap, Hamilton continued his charge through the field. Each overtake was cleaner and more spectacular than the last. He seemed to find grip where others couldn't, taking racing lines that defied logic but somehow worked perfectly. Victor Molnar watched in stunned silence as Hamilton passed car after car. For 20 years, he'd convinced himself that Hamilton's success was due to politics and favoritism. But you couldn't fake what he was witnessing now. "Papa," Zara whispered, "he's going to win, isn't he?" Victor couldn't find words to answer. He was watching his entire belief system crumble with each perfect overtake Hamilton completed. By lap 40, Hamilton was up to 4th place. The crowd's reaction had shifted dramatically. Booms were now mixed with gasps of appreciation and even scattered applause. Even his harshest critics couldn't deny the artistry they were witnessing. "Lewis, you're the fastest man on track by 3 seconds per lap," Bono reported. "The leaders are coming to you fast." Hamilton's response was quietly confident. "I can see them. Just need a few more laps." Dr. Rodriguez felt tears forming in her eyes as she watched Hamilton's performance. She'd worked with elite athletes for 15 years, but she'd never seen anything like this. Hamilton wasn't just driving, he was transcending the sport itself. Ferenc Nagy turned to Victor with tears in his own eyes. "In 40 years of watching racing, I've never seen anything like this. That man isn't just fast, he's an artist." Victor nodded slowly, unable to argue anymore. "I was wrong about him. Completely wrong." On lap 45, Hamilton caught the leaders. Max Verstappen was running 3rd, struggling with his Red Bull's handling in the wet conditions. As Hamilton approached for the overtake, the entire circuit fell silent. The move came at the chicane. Hamilton positioned his Mercedes perfectly on the inside line, forcing Verstappen to defend. But then Hamilton switched to the outside, using superior grip and car control to complete the pass around the outside of both corners. The crowd erupted. Not in booms this time, but in genuine appreciation for what they just witnessed. Even the most partisan Hungarian fans couldn't help but applaud such incredible driving. "Yes," Bono shouted over the radio. "That was genius, Lewis. Absolutely genius." Now only 2 cars remained ahead of Hamilton. both struggling badly in the deteriorating conditions. The rain was falling harder than ever, but Hamilton seemed to thrive in the chaos. His overtake for second place came on lap 52, another masterclass in wet weather racing. The defending driver had no answer for Hamilton's superior speed and technique. As Hamilton pulled alongside the race leader on lap 55, the entire Hungaroring held its breath. 50,000 people, many of whom had booed him mercilessly just hours earlier, were about to witness something extraordinary. The overtake for the lead was almost anticlimactic in its perfection. Hamilton drew alongside down the main straight, had better grip through the first corner and emerged ahead as if it had been inevitable all along. For the first time since arriving in Budapest, Hamilton allowed himself to smile inside his helmet. Lewis Hamilton. Bono's voice was thick with emotion. You have just taken the lead of the Hungarian Grand Prix. That was one of the greatest drives I've ever seen. Hamilton's reply was characteristically modest. Job's not done yet, mate. Still got 15 laps to go. But everyone watching knew the race was over. In these conditions, with this level of performance, Hamilton was untouchable. The only question was by how much he would win. As he crossed the finish line 15 laps later, the margin was devastating. Over 30 seconds ahead of second place. In Formula One terms, that was like winning by several miles. The crowd's transformation was complete. 50,000 Hungarian fans rose to their feet, applauding the man they had booed so viciously just 3 days earlier. Some wiped away tears, overwhelmed by what they'd witnessed. Victor Molnar stood and applauded with everyone else, his daughter Zara jumping up and down beside him. Papa, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Ferenc raised his Hungarian flag high, but now it felt like he was celebrating all of motorsport, not just his home country. That's why we love this sport, he said to anyone who would listen. Moments like that remind us what human beings are capable of. As Hamilton slowed his car after taking the checkered flag, Bono's voice came through the radio one final time. Lewis Hamilton, you have just won the Hungarian Grand Prix with one of the greatest drives in Formula One history. The whole world is watching, and they've just seen magic. Hamilton's response was quiet, almost whispered. For Grandpa Davidson, for everyone who ever felt like they didn't belong. This one's for all of us. In the grandstand, in homes around the world, in karting tracks where young drivers dreamed of racing glory, people understood they'd witnessed something transcendent. Not just a race victory, but a demonstration that excellence recognizes no boundaries. Hamilton had reminded everyone what was possible when pure talent met perfect preparation and unshakable determination. The booming crowd had become his greatest audience. The race that was supposed to break him had instead revealed his true greatness. And now, as he began his victory lap, the real magic was about to begin. Hamilton's Mercedes rolled slowly around the Hungaroring circuit, steam rising from the engine in the humid summer air. For a moment he sat motionless in the cockpit, the magnitude of what he'd just accomplished washing over him like the rain that had made his victory possible. 30 seconds. He'd won by 30 seconds in a sport where victories were usually measured in tenths, in wet conditions that leveled the playing field between cars. He'd made his Mercedes look like it belonged in a different category entirely. But more than the margin of victory, it was the crowd's reaction that overwhelmed him. Through his helmet, he could hear something he'd never expected to hear at the Hungaroring. Cheering, not scattered applause, but genuine, enthusiastic cheering from the same people who had booed him so viciously just 3 days earlier. Lewis, take your time with the victory lap. Bono's voice came through the radio, thick with emotion. The whole circuit is on its feet. They're all cheering for you now. Hamilton's hands shook slightly as he began driving slowly toward turn 1. 3 days ago, this same stretch of track had felt like enemy territory. Now it felt like a celebration of everything he'd worked for his entire career. As he passed the first grandstand section, something remarkable happened. Hungarian fans who had been waving anti-Hamilton banners on Friday were now holding up phones and cameras, trying to capture a piece of history. Children who had been taught to boo him were now jumping up and down with excitement. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the Mercedes hospitality suite, tears streaming down her face. In 15 years of working with elite athletes, she'd never seen a performance that transcended sport the way Hamilton's drive had. This wasn't just about winning a race. It was about proving that excellence could overcome any prejudice. How does it feel to witness greatness? asked Angela Cullen, Hamilton's trainer who had appeared beside Elena. Like watching someone rewrite the laws of physics, Elena replied. But more than that, like watching someone prove that the human spirit is unstoppable. In the grandstand, Victor Molnar stood with his arm around his daughter Zara, both of them plummeting as Hamilton's car approached their section. The transformation in Victor was complete. The man who had taught his daughter to hate Hamilton 3 days ago was now explaining to her why what they'd just witnessed was the greatest drive he'd ever seen. "Papa, why are you crying?" Zara asked, noticing tears in her father's eyes. Victor wiped his face with the back of his hand. "'Cause I'm ashamed, little one. For 20 years I let hatred blind me to beauty. That man just showed me what I was too stubborn to see." Ferenc Nagy appeared beside them, his weathered Hungarian flag now raised high in celebration. "It's never too late to recognize greatness," he told Victor. "The important thing is that you see it now." As Hamilton continued his victory lap, something unprecedented began to happen. Fans started throwing flowers onto the track instead of insults. Hungarian flags were joined by makeshift signs reading "Respect Lewis" and "Champion Driver." Children held up drawings they'd quickly sketched of his silver Mercedes. The transformation wasn't just individual, it was collective. An entire nation was reassessing everything they thought they knew about the British driver who had just delivered a masterclass in their country. Hamilton's car approached turn 4, the same corner where the most vicious booing had occurred on Friday. As he slowed down, expecting to simply drive past, something extraordinary happened. The crowd began chanting his name. "Ama Ilton! Ama Ilton!" 50,000 voices united in appreciation for what they'd witnessed. Hamilton pulled his car to a stop near the barrier, unable to continue driving through the emotion of the moment. He climbed out of his Mercedes and walked to the barrier, where hundreds of Hungarian fans reached out to touch him. The same hands that had made obscene gestures on Friday now offered congratulations and respect. Among the crowd was Zara Molnar, tears streaming down her young face as she held up a hastily hated sign. "Sorry, Lewis, you are great." Hamilton saw the sign and made his way through the crowd toward Zara. When he reached her, he took off his helmet and knelt down to her level. "What's your name?" he asked, in English, his voice hoarse from the emotional intensity of the moment. "Zara," she replied in broken English. I sorry for Friday. You are beautiful, driver." Hamilton's eyes filled with tears. This 12-year-old girl, who had been taught to hate him, was now apologizing for prejudice that wasn't even her own fault. "You have nothing to be sorry for," Hamilton told her gently. "But thank you for watching with an open heart." Victor pushed through the crowd behind his daughter, his face red with emotion. When he reached Hamilton, he did something nobody expected. He bowed deeply. "I was wrong," Victor said in heavily accented English. "You are not just fast driver. You are champion, real champion." Hamilton embraced Victor, and the crowd erupted in the loudest cheer of the day. The image of the British driver hugging his former critic became instantly iconic, a symbol of how sport could bridge any divide. "We're all learning," Hamilton told Victor. "That's what makes us human." As Hamilton prepared to continue his victory lap, Ferenc Nagy approached from the crowd. The old mechanic had tears in his eyes as he offered Hamilton his weathered Hungarian flag. "This flag has flown at this circuit for 35 years, Ferenc said. Today, you earned the right to carry it." Hamilton accepted the flag with reverence, understanding the significance of the gesture. He climbed back into his car, the Hungarian flag draped across his lap as he continued around the circuit. The rest of his victory lap became a celebration unlike anything seen in Formula One. Fans who had booed him mercilessly were now singing Hungarian folk songs in his honor. Marshals who had been protecting him from hostile crowds were now applauding as he passed. At turn 6, a group of young Hungarian drivers had gathered with their own carts, creating an impromptu honor guard for Hamilton's Mercedes. They waved checkered flags as he drove slowly past, dreaming that someday they might drive with such artistry. "Lewis, this is incredible." Bono's voice crackled through the radio. "I've never seen anything like this. You've won more than a race today. You've won heart." Hamilton's response was barely audible over the crowd noise. "Bono, this is what sport is supposed to be about. This is why we race." As he approached the final corner before the finish line, Hamilton could see the entire Mercedes team waiting for him in Parc Fermé. Mechanics who had worked through the night to perfect his car setup were now crying with joy. Engineers who had analyzed thousands of data points were now simply celebrating human achievement at its highest level. But Hamilton wasn't ready to reach Parc Fermé yet. He stopped his car one more time, this time at the main grandstand, where the most intense booing had occurred on Friday. He climbed out and walked to the center of the track, raising the Hungarian flag high above his head. The response was thunderous. 50,000 people cheering for a man they had tried to break just 3 days earlier. In that moment, something profound occurred to everyone present. This wasn't about nationalism or tribal loyalty anymore. This was about recognizing excellence wherever it came from, celebrating human potential at its absolute peak. Hamilton folded the Hungarian flag carefully and placed it on the nose of his Mercedes. Then he climbed back in and completed his victory lap, arriving in Parc Fermé to find his entire team waiting with tears of joy in their eyes. Toto Wolff, the Mercedes team principal, was the first to embrace him as he climbed from the car. "Lewis, that wasn't just a race win," Toto said, his voice thick with emotion. "That was a demonstration of why we fell in love with racing in the first place." Dr. Rodriguez pushed through the crowd to reach Hamilton. When she found him, he was sitting on his car, still wearing his racing suit, staring out at the crowd that continued to cheer his name. "How do you feel?" she asked. The same question she'd posed countless times during their sessions. Hamilton looked at her with tears in his eyes. "Like I finally understand what my grandfather meant when he said champions are tested when everybody's watching." "And what did you learn from the test?" "That excellence isn't about proving you belong. It's about showing others that they belong too. Every young driver watching today, every kid who feels different, every person who's been told they don't fit in, they all belong here." As Hamilton prepared for the podium ceremony, he could hear the crowd still chanting his name. The sound that had once filled him with dread now filled him with purpose. He thought about every young black driver who had given up because they thought Formula One wasn't for them. He thought about every person who had ever felt like an outsider, watching this moment and believing that they too could overcome any obstacle. But most of all, he thought about his grandfather Davidson, who had died never seeing Lewis win a championship, but who had always believed this day would come, not just the victory but the moment when excellence would silence hatred forever. The podium ceremony was still ahead. The interviews, the celebration, but Hamilton knew that the real victory had already happened during those precious minutes of his victory lap. He had reminded the world that sport at its highest level could transform hearts, change minds, and prove that human potential recognized no boundaries. The boy from Stevenage who had been told he didn't belong had just shown 50,000 people exactly where he belonged, at the very top of his sport, making the impossible look effortless. And in doing so, he had made the impossible seem possible for everyone watching. The podium ceremony at the Hungaroring had never sounded like this before. As Lewis Hamilton climbed the steps to the top position, 50,000 Hungarian voices erupted in cheers that seemed to shake the very foundations of the circuit. Hamilton paused at the top step, looking out at the sea of faces that had transformed from hostile to celebratory in the span of 70 laps. The Hungarian flag that Ferenc had given him was draped over his shoulders like a royal cape, a symbol of the impossible journey from villain to hero. When the British national anthem began to play, something unprecedented happened. The Hungarian crowd, who 3 days earlier had booed Hamilton's very presence, began singing along. The pronunciation was awkward and the melody uncertain, but the gesture was unmistakable. They were honoring not just a race winner, but a man who had earned their respect through pure excellence. Hamilton placed his hand over his heart and fought back tears as the words echoed around the circuit. He thought of his grandfather Davidson, who had never lived to see a moment like this but whose wisdom had carried Lewis through the darkest moments of the weekend. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the Mercedes hospitality area, taking notes for what she knew would be a landmark case study in sports psychology. She had witnessed something that textbooks said was impossible: a complete transformation of mass opinion through a single performance. "In my 15 years of working with athletes," she murmured to Angela Cullen, "I've never seen anything like this." Lewis didn't just win a race. He rewrote the laws of human psychology. When the ceremony ended and Hamilton raised the winner's trophy above his head, the crowd's response was deafening. But more important than the volume was the quality of the cheers. These weren't the polite applause of sportsmanship, but genuine celebration of greatness recognized. As Hamilton walked down from the podium, Carrying his trophy and still wearing Ferenc's Hungarian flag, he was surrounded by journalists from around the world. But the first person he stopped to speak with wasn't a reporter. It was Zara Molnar, who had somehow made her way to the front of the crowd with her father, Victor. "How do you feel?" Zara asked in her best English, holding up a small recording device her father had given her. Hamilton knelt down to her level, his voice gentle but strong. "I feel grateful, Zara. Grateful that people like you can see past the noise and judge someone by their actions, not their appearance or nationality." "Will you come back to Hungary?" Victor asked, stepping forward. His English was broken, but his sincerity was clear. "I'll always come back to Hungary," Hamilton replied, looking directly at Victor. "This country taught me something important this weekend. It taught me that hearts can change, that prejudice isn't permanent, and that excellence speaks a universal language." Behind them, Ferenc Nagy approached with tears in his eyes. The old mechanic had watched every race at the Hungaroring for 35 years, but he'd never seen anything that moved him like Hamilton's performance and the crowd's reaction. "You honored our flag today," Ferenc told Hamilton. "But more than that, you honored our capacity to recognize greatness when we see it." Hamilton embraced the old man, understanding that Ferenc represented something larger, the possibility that even the deepest prejudices could be overcome by undeniable truth. As the formal interviews began, Hamilton found himself in the unusual position of being asked not just about his driving, but about the transformation he'd witnessed in the crowd. "Lewis, we've never seen a reaction like this at a Formula One race," said the BBC reporter. "How do you explain what happened today?" Hamilton thought carefully before answering. "I think what happened today proves that sport at its highest level transcends everything that normally divides us. When you witness true excellence, it doesn't matter where someone comes from or what they look like. Excellence speaks for itself." "Do you feel vindicated after the hostile reception you received on Friday?" "I don't feel vindicated," Hamilton replied. "I feel hopeful. Hopeful that this moment will inspire young drivers from all backgrounds to believe they belong in this sport. Hopeful that people will remember that our differences make us stronger, not weaker." Hungarian television conducted their own interview, with Victor Molnar serving as translator. The questions were different, more personal, more reflective of the journey the Hungarian people had taken over the weekend. "What would you say to the Hungarian fans who booed you on Friday?" asked the interviewer. Hamilton smiled. "I would say thank you. Not for the booing, but for being open enough to change their minds. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong about someone. The Hungarian fans showed that courage today." The interview that would be most remembered, however, was the one Hamilton gave to a young Hungarian motorsport journalist named Anna Kovacs. Anna had been following the story of the crowd's transformation and wanted to understand the deeper implications. "Do you think this weekend changed Formula One forever?" Anna asked. Hamilton paused, considering the weight of the question. "I think this weekend proved that Formula One is more than just a sport. It's a platform for showing the world what human beings are capable of when we stop limiting each other and start celebrating each other." "What do you want people to remember about today?" "I want them to remember that excellence has no color, no nationality, no background. I want every young person watching to believe that they can achieve anything, if they're willing to work for it. And I want people to remember that changing your mind isn't weakness, it's growth." As the day progressed, social media exploded with videos from the race. But the most viral content wasn't Hamilton's driving. It was footage of the crowd's transformation. Videos of fans tearing up anti-Hamilton banners and making supportive signs instead. Pictures of children who had learned to hate him on Friday asking for his autograph on Sunday. Dr. Rodriguez began receiving calls from sports psychologists around the world, wanting to understand how such a complete transformation was possible. Her answer was always the same. Sometimes when someone performs at a level that transcends normal human limits, it forces everyone watching to reconsider their assumptions. The ripple effects extended far beyond the Hungaroring. Formula One teams reported a surge in applications from drivers of diverse backgrounds. Karting clubs across Europe saw increased participation from communities that had previously felt excluded from motorsport. But perhaps the most important change was in the Molnar household. That evening, Victor sat with Zara at their kitchen table, helping her write a letter to Hamilton. "What should I say, Papa?" Zara asked. Victor thought for a moment. "Tell him that he taught us something important. Tell him that you want to be a racing driver now. And you'll remember that driving fast isn't enough. You have to drive with your heart. Zara wrote carefully in her best English. Dear Mr. Hamilton, thank you for showing me that racing is about more than winning. You taught my papa and me that we should judge people by what they do, not where they come from. I want to be a racing driver like you someday. Will you teach me to be brave like you? Your friend, Zara. At the bottom, Victor added his own message. Lewis, I was wrong about you for 20 years. Thank you for being patient with people like me who take too long to see the truth. You are a champion in every sense of the word. Victor Molnar. Meanwhile, at his Budapest hotel, Hamilton sat quietly in his room, finally processing everything that had happened. The trophy sat on the desk beside him, but he kept thinking about the faces in the crowd. The transformation from hatred to respect, from prejudice to appreciation. His phone buzzed constantly with congratulations from around the world. But the message that meant the most came from his father, Anthony. Son, your grandfather would have been so proud today. Not just of your driving, but of how you handled yourself when the world was against you. You showed them that champions aren't just fast, they're gracious. Hamilton typed back, it wasn't about being gracious, Dad. It was about being human. They weren't really booing me, they were booing their own fear of what they didn't understand. Today they understood. Dr. Rodriguez's final observation of the weekend came in a report she would later publish in the Journal of Sports Psychology. The Hungarian Grand Prix of 2021 will be remembered not just as a remarkable athletic performance, but as proof that excellence can overcome any prejudice. Hamilton's drive demonstrated that when human beings perform at their absolute peak, it forces everyone watching to reevaluate their assumptions about what's possible. As the sun set over Budapest, Hamilton stood on his hotel balcony looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Zara Molnar was dreaming of becoming a racing driver. Victor was questioning other prejudices he might hold. Ferenc was telling anyone who would listen about the greatest drive he'd ever witnessed. The race was over, but its impact was just beginning. Hamilton had proven that sport could bridge any divide, that excellence recognized no boundaries, and that even the deepest hatred could be transformed into respect. Most importantly, he had shown every young person watching that they belonged wherever their talents could take them. The impossible had become inevitable. The villain had become the hero. And the world of motorsport would never be quite the same. As Hamilton prepared for bed, he looked one more time at the photo of his grandfather Davidson. "We did it, Grandpa," he whispered. "We showed them that champions aren't just made when nobody's watching. Sometimes they're revealed when everybody is." The victory lap was over, but the journey it had started would continue long after the checkered flag had fallen. 6 weeks after the Hungarian Grand Prix, Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in her London office reading emails from around the world. Sports psychologists, journalists, and researchers all wanted to understand what they were calling the Budapest phenomenon, how 50,000 hostile fans had transformed into supporters in the span of a single race. Her phone rang. It was Anna Kovacs, the young Hungarian journalist who had interviewed Hamilton after his victory. "Dr. Rodriguez, I need to tell you what's happening here in Hungary," Anna said, her voice filled with excitement. "The impact is incredible. Karting participation has increased by 300%. 300%! And not just Hungarian kids, children from all backgrounds." Elena wasn't surprised. She'd been tracking similar reports from across Europe. Hamilton's drive hadn't just won a race. It had sparked a movement. "Tell me about the Molnar family," Elena said. She'd been following their story since reading about Zara's letter to Hamilton. "That's why I'm calling. Victor Molnar has become one of Hamilton's biggest supporters in Hungary. He started a foundation called Racing Without Borders to help young drivers from all backgrounds get started in motorsport. And Zara, what about Zara? She's already the fastest 12-year-old kart driver in Hungary. But more than that, she talks about Hamilton's philosophy everywhere she goes. She says racing isn't about beating other people. It's about bringing out the best in yourself and others." Elena smiled. The transformation was spreading exactly as she'd hoped it would. Meanwhile, at the Hungaroring circuit, Ferenc Nagy was giving a tour to a group of young racing drivers from across Eastern Europe. The Hamilton Molnar Foundation had organized the visit, bringing together kids who might never have had access to professional racing facilities. "This is turn 4. Ferenc told the group. stopping at the spot where Hamilton had embraced Victor during his victory lap. This is where hatred became respect. This is where we learned that greatness has no nationality. Among the young drivers was Dmitry Petrov, a 15-year-old from Romania whose family had saved for 3 years to afford basic karting equipment. He stared at the corner with wide eyes. "Mr. Nagy, do you really think someone like me could race in Formula One someday?" Dmitry asked. Franz knelt down to the boy's level, the same way Hamilton had with Zara. "Son, 6 weeks ago I watched a driver prove that talent recognizes no boundaries. If you have the speed and the heart, the rest is just details." The foundation was Victor's way of making amends for 20 years of prejudice. He'd sold his small construction business and used the money to create opportunities for young drivers who faced the same barriers that had once made him bitter. "I spent 2 decades angry about opportunities I thought were unfair," Victor explained to the young drivers. "Now I want to create opportunities that are fair for everyone." In England, Hamilton was experiencing his own ripple effects. The Hamilton Commission, his initiative to increase diversity in motorsport, had received unprecedented support since Hungary. Major corporations were funding scholarships, and Formula One teams were actively recruiting from previously ignored communities. But the change Hamilton valued most was personal. He'd received thousands of letters from young people around the world, all inspired by what they'd witnessed in Budapest. One letter particularly moved him. It came from Marcus Johnson, a 14-year-old from Birmingham, whose single mother worked 3 jobs to support his karting dreams. "Dear Lewis," the letter read, "I watched your race in Hungary with my mom. She cried when you won because she said it reminded her that dreams don't have to stay dreams. I'm black like you, and sometimes I wondered if Formula One was really for people like us. After Hungary, I know it is. Thank you for showing me that excellence is the only language that really matters." Hamilton read the letter 3 times, thinking of his own childhood when his father Anthony had worked multiple jobs to fund his racing career. The cycle of inspiration was continuing. Dr. Rodriguez's research into the Hungarian transformation had led to a groundbreaking discovery. She'd identified what she called the excellence threshold, the point where performance becomes so undeniable that it overrides prejudice and preconceptions. What happened in Hungary wasn't magic, she explained to a conference of sports psychologists in Vienna. It was the result of performance so far beyond normal human limits that it forced everyone watching to reconsider their assumptions. Hamilton didn't just drive fast, he transcended the sport itself. The academic world was fascinated by her findings. But Elena knew the real proof was in the stories flooding in from around the world. In Budapest, Zara Molnar was becoming a local celebrity. Her karting performances were drawing crowds. But more importantly, her attitude was inspiring other young drivers. She'd adopted Hamilton's pre-race routine of taking a moment to think about all the people who had helped her get to the track. "Racing isn't just about me," she told a Hungarian sports reporter. "It's about showing other kids that they can dream big too." Lewis taught me that. Victor watched his daughter's interview from the garage, tears in his eyes. The man who had once taught her to hate Hamilton was now watching her spread his message of inclusion and excellence. "Papa, are you proud of me?" Zara asked after the interview. "I'm proud of who you're becoming," Victor replied. "But more than that, I'm grateful. You helped me see what I was too stubborn to see myself." Prince, now in his 70s, had become an unofficial historian of the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend. He gave talks at racing schools across Europe, always focusing on the same theme: how sport could unite people across any divide. "I've seen every great driver of the past 40 years, he would tell his audiences. But what Hamilton did in Hungary was different. He didn't just drive fast, he showed us that we're all capable of being better than our prejudices." The ripple effects weren't limited to motorsport. Hamilton's transformation from villain to hero in Hungary had become a case study in universities, a symbol in corporate diversity training, and an inspiration in youth programs worldwide. But perhaps the most meaningful impact was the simplest one. Children around the world were learning that excellence could overcome any obstacle. Dr. Rodriguez received a video call from Professor Sarah Williams at Oxford University, who had been studying the long-term effects of the Hungarian weekend. "Elena, we're seeing something unprecedented in our research on childhood development and prejudice," Professor Williams said. "Children who watch the Hungarian Grand Prix show significantly higher scores on empathy tests and significantly lower scores on prejudice indicators. How is that possible from one sporting event? Because they witnessed the power of changing your mind. They saw 50,000 adults admit they were wrong about someone and celebrate that person instead. It's teaching them that flexibility of thought is strength, not weakness. Elena nodded, understanding the profound implications. Hamilton's victory lap hadn't just changed the crowd in Hungary. It was changing how children around the world thought about difference and belonging. At Mercedes headquarters in Brackley, England, team principal Toto Wolff was reading reports about the global impact of Hamilton's Hungarian victory. Applications to the Mercedes engineering program from underrepresented groups had increased by 500%. Other Formula One teams were reporting similar surges. Lewis changed more than just the race result that day. Toto told his senior staff during a team meeting. He changed what people think is possible, not just in racing but in life. The commercial impact was significant too. Brands that had hesitated to associate with Hamilton before Hungary were now eager to work with him. But Hamilton was selective, choosing only partnerships that aligned with his mission of creating opportunities for others. "I'm not interested in just making money," he told his management team. "I want to build something that lasts beyond my racing career, something that helps other people believe they belong." Back in Hungary, the Hungaroring circuit had become a pilgrimage site for young drivers. The spot where Hamilton had stopped during his victory lap was marked with a small plaque, and visitors often left flowers or notes of inspiration. One such note, left by a young girl from Slovakia, read simply, "Thank you for showing us that hearts can change." Viktor Molnar made a point of visiting that spot every week, often bringing young drivers from his function. He would tell them the story of his own transformation, using himself as an example of how wrong it was possible to be, and how important it was to admit it. "I spent 20 years hating someone I didn't really know," he would tell them. "Don't make my mistake. Judge people by their actions, not your assumptions." As autumn arrived in Budapest, Zara was preparing for her first international karting competition. The Hamilton Molnar Foundation had arranged for several young drivers to compete in Italy, giving them exposure to professional racing they never could have afforded otherwise. The night before leaving for Italy, Zara sat with her father looking at photos from the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend. The images told an incredible story, from the hostile crowds on Friday to the celebrating fans on Sunday. "Papa, do you think we'll ever see anything like that again?" Zara asked. Victor thought carefully before answering. "I hope not, little one." "Why?" "Because I hope we've learned our lesson. I hope we'll never again need someone to drive like a god just to prove they belong." Dr. Rodriguez's final report on the Hungarian phenomenon concluded with a simple observation. Excellence, when genuine and undeniable, possesses the power to rewrite the human heart. What we witnessed in Hungary wasn't just a sporting achievement. It was a demonstration of our capacity for growth, understanding, and redemption. 6 months later, when Formula One returned to Hungary, the atmosphere was completely different. Hamilton arrived to cheers, not boos. Children wore Mercedes caps alongside Hungarian flags. The transformation was permanent, but the real victory wasn't the welcome Hamilton received. It was the legacy he'd created. Across Europe, young drivers from every background were pursuing their racing dreams, inspired by what they'd witnessed in Budapest. The boy from Stevenage who had been told he didn't belong had proven that belonging wasn't something you were given. It was something you earned through excellence, maintained through character, and shared through inspiration. The ripple effects of 70 perfect laps continued to spread, touching lives Hamilton would never know, in ways he could never imagine. And somewhere in Hungary, a young girl named Zara was learning to drive with her heart, carrying forward a message that excellence truly knew no boundaries. 2 years after the Hungarian Grand Prix that changed everything, Lewis Hamilton returned to Budapest for what would become known as the most meaningful race weekend of his career. But this time he wasn't coming just to race. The Hungaroring circuit buzzed with activity as the Racing Without Borders International Karting Championship took place alongside the Formula One weekend. Young drivers from 37 countries had gathered to compete, but more importantly to celebrate what the Hungarian weekend had started. Hamilton walked through the paddock early Saturday morning, watching 12-year-old drivers from Romania, Slovakia, Hungary, and beyond preparing their karts with the same intensity he brought to Formula One. Among them was Zara Molnar, now 14 and already being called the most promising young driver in Eastern Europe. Lewis, Zara called out when she spotted him. Her English had improved dramatically, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had found her purpose. Hamilton smiled as he approached her garage space. "How are you feeling about today's race?" "Nervous, but excited," Zara replied. "Papa says nerves mean you care about something important." Victor Molnar emerged from behind a stack of tires, his face lighting up when he saw Hamilton. The transformation in Victor was complete. The man who had once taught his daughter to hate Hamilton was now wearing a Mercedes team shirt with Hamilton's number 4. "Lewis, welcome back," Victor said, embracing him like an old friend. "Zara has been preparing for this race like it's the most important moment of her life." "It is important," Hamilton replied, "but not because of winning or losing. It's important because she's showing other kids what's possible when you drive with your heart." Ferenc Nagy appeared beside them, moving more slowly at 75 but still carrying his weathered Hungarian flag. The old mechanic had become the unofficial grandfather of the Racing Without Borders program, mentoring young drivers and sharing stories of the weekend that changed everything. 2 years ago, this corner was filled with hatred, Ferenc said, pointing toward turn 4 where Hamilton had stopped during his victory lap. Today it's filled with dreams. That's the real victory. As the day progressed, Hamilton moved through the karting paddock like a beloved teacher visiting his students. He spent time with each young driver, offering advice but more importantly, listening to their stories. He met Dmitry Petrov, now 17 and racing in junior formula categories thanks to a scholarship from the Hamilton Commission. Dmitry had gone from barely affording karting to being mentored by former Formula One engineers. "Lewis, I want you to know something," Dmitry said. "When I was 15 and dreaming seemed impossible, I watched your Hungarian race on an old television in my village. That race taught me that excellence isn't about where you come from. It's about where you're willing to go." Hamilton felt the same emotion he'd experienced during his victory lap 2 years earlier. The real victory hadn't been crossing the finish line first. It had been opening doors for others to walk through. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was documenting the weekend for a book she was writing about the psychology of transformation. Watching Hamilton interact with the young drivers, she saw something remarkable. A man who had found his true purpose beyond racing. "How does it feel to see your legacy taking shape?" she asked, during a quiet moment. "Legacy is too big a word," Hamilton replied. "I just wanted to show people that belonging isn't something you're given. It's something you earn through how you treat others and how hard you're willing to work. And do you think you've succeeded?" Hamilton gestured toward the paddock full of diverse young drivers, all chasing the same dream that had once seemed impossible for most of them. "Look around. The success isn't mine, it's theirs." The karting races that weekend were competitive and exciting, but the real drama was in the stories being written. Young drivers who had never imagined racing professionally were now being scouted by junior teams. Families who had sacrificed everything for their children's dreams were seeing those dreams become reality. Zara's main race took place on Sunday morning, just hours before the Formula One Grand Prix. Hamilton watched from the pit wall as she lined up on the starting grid, remembering his own karting days when his father Anthony had made similar sacrifices to give him opportunities. The race was brilliant. Zara started 5th, but worked her way through the field with patient, intelligent driving that reminded everyone of Hamilton's style. She didn't win, finishing 3rd, but her driving displayed the same grace under pressure that had made Hamilton legendary. After the race, as Zara celebrated on the podium with drivers from Italy and France, Hamilton realized something found. The real victory wasn't about him anymore. It was about creating a world where young drivers like Zara could compete on equal terms, judged only by their talent and character. That afternoon, before the Formula One race, Hamilton walked to turn 4, where his transformation from villain to hero had begun 2 years earlier. A small memorial plaque now marked the spot, reading simply, "Here excellence conquered prejudice." Hundreds of fans had gathered there not to boo this time, but to thank him for what he'd done. Among them were many of the same people who had hated him. "Mr. Hamilton," called out a middle-aged Hungarian man, "I was here 2 years ago and I booed you. I want to apologize and thank you." "Thank me for what?" Hamilton asked. "For being patient with us. For showing us that greatness comes in many forms. My son is racing karts now because of what you inspired." Similar conversations happened throughout the afternoon. Parents thanking Hamilton for inspiring their children. Former critics admitting they had been wrong. Young people sharing how his victory lap had changed their understanding of what was possible. But the conversation that meant the most came from Victor Molnar as they watched Zara pack up her cart after the weekend's racing. "Lewis, I need to tell you something," Victor said. "2 years ago, I thought racing was about proving who was better than who. You taught me it's about proving what we're all capable of when we support each other." "You taught yourself that," Hamilton replied. "I just gave you a reason to look differently." "Zara wants to be like you," Victor continued. "Not just fast, but kind. Not just competitive, but inspiring. That's the real championship, isn't it?" Hamilton nodded, understanding that Victor had grasped something essential about sport and life. Winning was temporary, but inspiring others created something permanent. As the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend concluded, Hamilton reflected on the journey from that dark Friday in 2021 to this celebratory Sunday in 2023. The transformation hadn't just been in the crowd's reaction, it had been in his own understanding of why he raced. Dr. Rodriguez's final interview with Hamilton captured the essence of what had changed. "2 years ago, you came to Hungary as a 6-time world champion seeking to prove you belonged. How do you see yourself now?" "Now I see myself as someone who learned that belonging isn't about fitting in. It's about helping others understand that they fit in too. Racing gave me a platform, but these kids give me purpose." The weekend ended with a ceremony honoring the Racing Without Borders program. Young drivers from across Europe stood together, holding flags from their home countries while wearing the same racing colors, a visual representation of unity and diversity. Hamilton spoke to the gathered crowd. "2 years ago, this circuit taught me that excellence is the greatest teacher, compassion is the strongest weapon, and that victory has many forms. Today, you're all proving that lesson was worth learning." As the sun set over Budapest, Hamilton walked one final time past Turn 4, where his victory lap had begun the transformation that was still spreading across the world. The plaque caught the evening light, its simple message as powerful as ever. Here, excellence conquered prejudice. But Hamilton knew the real monument wasn't made of metal and stone. It was made of young drivers like Zara, of transformed hearts like Victor's, of opportunities created and barriers broken. The boy from Stevenage who had been told he didn't belong had spent his career proving that belonging was earned through excellence. But in Hungary, he'd learned something even more important: belonging was multiplied when shared with others. The real victory wasn't crossing the finish line first in 2021. The real victory was watching Zara cross her finish line in 2023, carrying forward a message that excellence truly knew no boundaries. As Hamilton prepared to leave Budapest, he received a text from Zara. "Thank you for teaching me that racing isn't about beating other people. It's about helping everyone become their best selves." Hamilton smiled as he typed back, "You figured that out all by yourself. Now go teach others." The Hungarian Grand Prix of 2021 had ended with a victory lap that changed everything. But the real victory was still being written, one young driver at a time, one changed heart at a time, one dream made possible at a time. Excellence had conquered prejudice, but more importantly, it had created a legacy that would last long after the checkered flags stopped falling. In the end, that was the perfect revenge, transforming hatred into hope, proving that the greatest victories weren't about defeating enemies, but about turning them into friends and inspiring them to be their best selves. The magic Hamilton had shown in those 70 perfect laps continued to echo through every young driver who now believed they belonged wherever their talents could take them. And that, Hamilton realized, was victory in its purest form. And that was the end of this incredible story of Lewis Hamilton's perfect revenge. A victory lap that transformed hatred into respect and proved that excellence truly knows no boundaries. We'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and tell us your city or country. It's amazing to connect with viewers from all around the world who believe in the power of kindness and understanding. If this story inspired you, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that celebrate the human spirit and show us what's possible when we choose hope over hatred. And here's the most important part. Share this video with your friends and family. In a world that sometimes feels divided, stories like Hamilton's remind us that we're all capable of growth, forgiveness, and transformation. Let's spread that message of kindness and awareness together. Because just like Hamilton showed us in Hungary, the greatest victories happen when we help others believe they belong. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.